I don't question anybody's authenticity around the value of the environment. We heard very clearly that our community cares deeply about the environment, also care deeply about housing, and we need to figure out a way to do both.
That's Seattle City Councilmember Eddie Lin, who represents District 2 in Southeast Seattle, also chairs the council's Land Use and Sustainability Committee. He's talking about a new measure he is proposing that would change the way people can file environmental appeals on things like major zoning changes in the city. And if your ears perked up a little bit at the phrases environmental appeals and zoning changes, you're not alone. This is a controversial issue. So what are the pros and cons here? What's this council bill all about? Plus, how does this fit into the whole comprehensive plan process, that roadmap for development that the city is really overdue to deliver at this point? There's a lot to discuss there, too. We are covering these topics and so much more on a very special Patrons First episode of Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I am a host on the Seattle channel. The views expressed here are mine, and I am with the one and only, I think I can do it here. There he is. Councilmember Eddie Lin joins me here. Councilmember Lin, thank you for coming on the show. I got to ask, you chair the Land Use Committee and the Select Committee on the Comprehensive Plan. So do you give yourself paper cuts and pour lemon juice on them in your free time? Are you a glutton for punishment? What's it like to chair these two committees?
It's an honor. You know, both the comprehensive plan, the land use, these are deeply important issues for our city. It's one of the major reasons I ran is to try and see if we can both address our housing affordability crisis while maintaining, our core values around the environment. So we can have both. That's critical. And that is something that we need to keep our eyes on the ball.
Yeah.
I moved here in 1998 because I fell in love with the mountains, the water, like so many people who have come here and said this is one of the most beautiful places on the planet.
Yeah.
We are extremely fortunate to have such clean air, such clean water. We absolutely need to protect it. And that's why we need to get this right. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Me too. Councilmember Lin, thank you so much for making this happen. Thanks also to the patrons who are making this happen. A Patrons First podcast here. So you want to get this in your inbox before anybody else? Become a patron on Patreon. Giving levels start at $5 per month. You get access to these Patrons First podcasts. You get a cool decal, too. That's kind of awesome. So please head to Patreon and become a paying member. A shout out to our friends on Converge Media. The video version of the program is on Converge, and we appreciate their support, too. All right, let's get things started. Time for Right Here, Right Now. Councilmember Lin, we spoke a few months ago on the Seattle channel about the comprehensive plan, which is all about managing growth and development in Seattle. It can turn into a really wonky topic really quickly. But I thought you had a really good description of it. It's like you're painting a picture as you said it to me. The comp plan is this broad outline. Now the city's filling in some details. Does that analogy still fit? Is this watercolor with the paints mixing together? How do you look at this overall comp plan process?
Yeah, hopefully that helps to make it a little bit more accessible for people. It is really complicated. And just to give people a big picture of where we are at, the comprehensive plan is our big planning process where we imagine what our city is going to look like over the next 20 or plus years. And so it's something we do every decade. The process started way back in 2022. Part of that is we have to do an environmental review of all the different proposals. And it's not just things like when we talk about the environment, it's actually much bigger than what you might think about the environment. It's also things like traffic or impacts to businesses, impacts to schools. So it is a broad analysis. Again, that started in 2022. We passed the comprehensive plan at the end of 2025. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we passed is we passed the zoning. So the zoning is the details, fine level, granular details that then basically implements this big plan on our comprehensive plan. So we did the zoning in the neighborhood residential areas that used to be single family zoning. So we do have the zoning in place for neighborhood residential. We do not have zoning in place for the rest of the city that sort of matches our recently updated comprehensive plan. So that's the next body of work, is we have to do zoning throughout the rest of the city. And then there are also additional updates that we want to do to the comprehensive plan that are coming out of last year. So, for example, City Council passed a resolution last year that wanted to look at additional neighborhood centers. So, for example, in District 2, there's a neighborhood where near Seward Park, there's a bookstore, there's coffee shops. That could be a new neighborhood center, but we need to do an analysis of those. So that is another part that we will be working on. That's phase 3.
Got it. And I just wanted to figure out something with regard to the process right now, because last month, The Washington Court of Appeals said that 2 appeals of the plan's environmental review can go forward. A 3-judge panel said those appeals were improperly dismissed earlier. So these appeals are saying, just in general here, the city hasn't properly evaluated the impact of the comp plan on our stormwater system, our tree canopy, traffic congestion, and a whole lot more here. I don't want to get into the legal cases here, but I'm kind of looking at the bottom line. It sounds like this hope to get forward here with these different phases, really getting the comp plan up and running, that's been delayed significantly. Can you talk about that piece, please?
Yeah, and just to provide a little bit of what that process looks like is currently we did a 3-year environmental impact statement. What happened from 2022, we did, received hundreds of comments. This is the Office of Planning and Community Development, and then they issued the final EIS in 2025. Currently, people have a right to appeal that to the hearing examiner. There were some folks that appealed it to the hearing examiner. Their appeal was dismissed based on new state legislation that the city believed and the hearing examiner believed basically preempted those appeals. That was appealed further to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals said, no, your code currently says that people have an ability to appeal this to the hearing examiner. You should get to the merits of their appeal. They did not weigh in on whether we had done enough studies or not. But they said, hey, under your code, you allow this. You should basically, hearing examiner should hear them out to see if you need to do additional studies.
Got it. And I know this legislation you're working on, which we will be talking about in just a minute here, that really speaks to some of these issues and what happens when these appeals go through the hearing examiner, et cetera. I just wanted to talk about, just to help frame this a little bit more, Councilmember Lin, before we get into the details of this council bill, is setting the stage here. What does success look like in this process? I know there's no way to make everybody happy here, but what do you hope comes out of this, and how is this going to affect the average Seattle resident, the comp plan process here, please?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we want to have a thoughtful process. We want to engage with the community. We want to make sure that people have their voices heard. We want to make sure that we are accommodating for the growth that is, we need to plan for. We need to make sure there's going to be enough housing and to really be serious about addressing our housing affordability crisis. We also, need to make sure that we are accommodating for our industry, our manufacturing, and that we are also, again, taking into account our core values around equity, around anti-displacement, around making sure this is not just an affordable place to live, but a green, that we are taking into consideration the future impacts of the impending climate crisis.
Got it. Thank you very much. All right, we need to dive into it, folks, here. We're going to take a close look at Councilmember Lin's proposal to change how people can make environmental appeals in the city of Seattle when it comes to these large zoning changes here. More next on Now Hear This. Okay, here we go, folks. Council Bill 12-1215, the SEPA Appeals Ordinance, SEPA, the State Environmental Protection Act. The City Council held a public hearing about this on July 1st. So this bill would remove the legal avenue people currently have to appeal using SEPA and the city's internal hearing examiner. Through the weeds here, folks. You'll figure it out here. So people would still be able to file appeals. That's important to point out. But they would have to go through a more rigorous process via the King County Superior Court or the state's Growth Management Hearings Board. Proponents say the council bill is needed to streamline the city's growth plan, which, as we explained earlier, has been delayed yet again. But opponents say this bill takes away a right to appeal and amounts to an assault on our environment.
This bill would remove that critical check and further amplify the already outsized influence of lobbyists who advocate for policies that benefit their bottom line at the expense of the environment and the people who live here. Please reject CB 12-1215.
This is a layer of review state law never required in the first place. Nothing about environmental protection changes here, and full SEPA review stays exactly as rigorous as it is today. What goes away is a second redundant appeal step that other major cities in our region, including Bellevue, Tacoma, and Everett, have already eliminated without incident.
Councilmember Lin, I want to start by talking about what this bill does, if indeed it does pass, and what it does not do, because I think there's been some confusion about that.
Yeah, there's a couple different pieces. One, so it does not change any of our environmental regulations. So we have some of the strictest environmental regulations in the country, things like our energy code, things like our stormwater code. It does not affect our tree code. None of those are impacted. So the name of SEPA, State Environmental Protection Act, is a little bit misleading because it actually does not protect the environment at all. What it does do is it says, you city, you need to make sure that you are analyzing a number of different things. And again, the way that environment is defined under SEPA is much broader than what many of us would think about the environment. So I just want to give an example.
Okay.
There's been a project, the Missing Link. It's a bike trail up in Ballard.
Yep.
It has been appealed for 2 decades, basically. And SEPA has been in the heart of those appeals, and that's since 2008. Does a bike lane have things that we need to analyze? Absolutely. Are there pros and cons to where this bike lane goes? Absolutely. Does it need 2 decades of environmental analysis? Are there significant impacts to the environment that we need to be spending 2 decades on? I don't believe so. So that's just one project. Another project that has been appealed since 2008, hundreds of affordable homes at Fort Lawton and Magnolia. Again, are there tough things that we need to consider as we look at putting hundreds of affordable homes at Fort Lawton? Sure. Are there debates or discussions that we need to have? Sure. Are there such enormous environmental impacts that we need to be studying this for 2 decades? I do not believe so. And so when we talk about sort of this environment, SEPA, what we have seen is it causes very significant delays to our ability to make meaningful progress as a city on things like affordable housing. It gives any person, you don't even have to live in the city, any business, the ability to cause serious delays to our ability to move forward with important things. And what it doesn't do, again, it does not require, even if you, quote unquote, win your appeal, what you are winning is you are basically saying, hey, city, you need to do more studies, you need to do more analysis. It does not require the city to do a single thing other than to continue to study something, which when we are in a housing crisis, when we are in a climate crisis, the delays associated with this are causing real harm to our ability to address our most urgent issues.
Got it. I want to make sure that I roll through some of the different criticisms that have come up through this. And there was one out there that really talked about this bill potentially pushing the average person out of the appeals process. So what costs about $120 to connect with a city hearing examiner would now involve going into something that would be a lot more involved, more time, a legal team potentially, more resources, as people would have to go through the King County Superior Court or the state's Growth Management Hearings Board. Can you respond to that?
Well, I think as we've had this discussion, I think most people do not find this process accessible at all.
Even with the city hearing examiner?
Even with the city hearing examiner.
Okay.
And that's because in order to have an effective appeal, you either need to have a ton of time on your hands to wade through all the sort of legal complications of this or to hire a lawyer. And that's because we are talking about really in the weeds stuff. And so to say that our current process is accessible, it is not accessible to many in our community who do not have countless hours to go down and read through the 1,300-page FEIS, to appeal it to the hearing examiner, spend countless hours. So I don't think it's accessible right now. I don't think we are really making any changes to accessibility by removing what is a redundant and in many ways a harmful process that ultimately it does not protect the environment one iota. What it does do is cause significant delays to our ability to address our most urgent issues.
Got it. Let me run down some numbers with you here, too, because this has been part of the criticism as well. So there have been 28 SEPA appeals of non-project actions, as they're called. So essentially these big rezoning projects over the last 10 years in Seattle. That equals about, fewer than 3 per year. In 19 of those 28 cases, the appeal was dismissed or withdrawn before a full hearing, averaging 52 days to resolve. So there are a group of critics writing about this in the South Seattle Emerald. They said, that doesn't sound like endless obstruction. It sounds like functioning accountability if it takes about 52 days out there. Help me out with that part of it too, please.
Well, I think that low number of appeals basically shows how this is not a useful tool for the public. Really, at the end of the day, what we need to be doing is engaging with the public in a meaningful way. And we need to be out talking to neighbors, out engaging with folks. And this hearing examiner process, it's almost like a delegation of our responsibility as city council, which is to wade into these very meaty and difficult issues. We need to be talking to the neighbors about their concerns, whether those are around anti-displacement, whether they're around, heat islands or how to protect the trees or the salmon. Those are things that we should be doing and focus on. And again, kicking this over to the hearing examiner to then weigh in on whether, the planning department needs to study something more, that does not help me as a city council member really making a more informed decision. The other part of it is those ones that get dismissed immediately, really, those just show like that these many of these appeals, if you're not even getting to the merits of the appeal, like why are we even delaying by months if we're not even getting to the merits of the issue?
Yeah,
There's zero value in that process.
I was going to say the phrase I've heard you say it and others too. This whole concept of weaponizing the process. I think some people have heard that phrase. How do you mean that? Because I think that's an important thing to explain.
And this is not something that I come to lightly. And prior to city council, I practiced real estate law. I did land use as well. I filed some of these appeals on behalf of businesses or other folks who were upset with a project. It is a very powerful tool if you are opposed to a project, or if you're opposed to sort of the city taking some sort of action. Whether the intent is to cause delay, there is no doubt that is the impact of this. And what you're doing is you're giving a very powerful tool to certain people who can take advantage of it. Oftentimes, these are businesses and people that have the resources to take advantage of this legal tool. Most people do not find this a meaningful way to engage with decision makers. And just for one example, we've been looking at, there was a proposal last year, I'm sure you covered, to do housing in the Soto and the Stadium District.
Stadium District, right.
That was appealed by the port. It was opposed by, the longshoremen. We lost that appeal. Now we are going back to look at sort of our sub-area plan for that same area. Our sub-area plan is now being appealed by the other side, by the stadiums who, had wanted to see housing in that area. So we see the same tool being used by both sides who are using every tool at their disposal. Really, these are political decisions. People do need to make sure that we are engaging with both sides, that we are trying to find compromise when we can. But these endless sort of appeals from sort of both sides of an issue, they're not helping us resolve our differences.
Got it. So take me through this. Let's say, I'm just going to use an abstract here if I could, but there's a zoning decision of some sort. Someone has a concern about it. They want to appeal. And what would be different if your bill were put in place versus what we have now?
Well, so really, and what they really want is they want to engage with the decision makers, and they want to potentially try to change our mind. Mm-hmm. And that is what the hearing examiner cannot do. The hearing examiner cannot sort of issue a ruling that says, City Council, you shall vote this way or that way. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so the whole idea behind SEPA is that it should inform decision makers. And when we went through that 3-year EIS process, we have enough information in terms of what we need from the department to make an informed decision. What we really need to be doing is engaging with the community to find if we can come up with win-win solutions. So, for example, recently, Tree Action Seattle and the Master Builders Association, they came together and they came up with a proposal to do sort of increased density if you had a courtyard. It's like a courtyard bonus. Those are the types of win-win things where, we see two sides who are used to fighting with each other. Coming together to see if we can come up with a win-win. So those are the things that, as a city council member, that I want to encourage. That again, the hearing examiner does not encourage sort of win-win solutions. He cannot sort of require win-win solutions. The only outcome you can get from the hearing examiner appeal is, hey, Office of Planning Community Department, you need to study this more. And then what happens is because there's so much delay in that process, and we can't get to the hard work of engaging with these different groups and getting them together, we then don't have the time to do the real engagement that we need to do, because we've spent so much time in court, in litigation, or in this sort of environmental sort of review process that we don't have the time to do the hard work of engaging with our community.
Got it. And I just wanted to ask, let's take it from the flip side of that, if we could. Let's say this measure does pass. How does that help in a positive way out there in terms of helping the environment or whatever else? How would you describe that? Because I think some people might see this really as a negative. You're trying to spin it as a positive, and I want to make sure we explain how.
Well, first of all, I think what I would like to say is, one, I absolutely consider myself an environmentalist. One of the first jobs I had in high school was knocking doors for an environmental organization, Clean Water Action, raising money. Again, it's one of the reasons I fell in love with this area. And it's one of the reasons I ran for office. What the most important thing we can probably be doing to protect our environment, to address the urgent issue of climate change is to get people out of their cars. Number one greenhouse gas emission for our city, transportation. Number two is our buildings. The other thing is when we build new buildings, especially dense multifamily housing, that is way more sustainable than the single family homes that, for example, I live in a 100-year-old single family home. It's beautiful. I love it. Have a beautiful yard, but that is way less efficient in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of the fact that, I have two cars and our family has two cars and I drive way more than I should. The best thing we can do is to get people like me to be taking transit more, to build walkable, dense walkable neighborhoods. So again, that is the top thing we can be doing. Things like our Seattle Transit measure, which we're discussing right now.
That's right.
Long-term investments in light rail, in transit. There's an analysis that if you get one person out of their car or, to switch to transit, that's equivalent to like 100, the carbon sequestration of 100 trees for a year.
Wow.
So when we are talking about sort of the trees and housing, we can do both. What we can't do is we can't do sort of, trees, housing, and everybody having, two cars. We have 1.6 million parking spaces in the city, even though we only have 800,000 residents. We should be converting parking lots to green space, to trees, right? That's how we're going to be, if we can get people out of their cars, not having so much of our space devoted to pavement, which is really the cause of our heat islands. That's how we're going to protect our environment. So we need to, again, work with our community to find out how we can achieve these solutions, how we can do so in an equitable manner, and how we can do that, while also having good jobs and protecting affordability.
Thank you for that. All right, well, coming up, plenty of questions remain about Council Bill 12-12-15. What kind of answers are we going to get this summer? We're going to break down the timeline ahead, coming up on What's Next. Councilmember Lin, I have to imagine when you write your What I Did This Summer diary entry coming up this fall, it's going to have a lot about this council bill and the comp plan too. Can you just take us, though, through the next few weeks here in July? What can people expect to see out of the process at the end of this month and going forward as the summer ends too?
Yeah, so the next steps for our SEPA legislation is we are planning to have another in our land use committee meeting on July 15th, I believe is the next date. Our comprehensive plan is largely on hold because of the uncertainty caused by the ongoing litigation. And that's the other hard part about this that I didn't talk about is it's really important for us as we are going through this planning process for us to be able to communicate with the public about what the next steps are, where they can engage. I can't do that right now because I don't know when this whole process will ever end. We are looking at 2027 as possibly when we would be able to really pick this back up again.
Right.
But that's just part of the difficulty of this and part of the harms that I'm trying to address with 12-12-15.
Talk to me about what your fellow council members are saying about this process. I know we're pretty early with 12-12-15, but are they supportive? What are you hearing? How are they guiding you in this process?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're having sort of they're hearing a lot of the sort of the debate that we are hearing. And I do want to make clear that you have environmentalists who are on both sides of this.
Yes.
You have, we heard very passionately from young folks who are deeply worried about climate change and our future and are worried that if we don't start taking it more seriously and if there are further delays in our ability to take action, that, we are just getting further and further behind in our ability to plan for and to make meaningful progress on climate change. You have other people who are deeply passionate about the environment and believe that, this is an important tool for them. So we will continue to have that discussion. And, the most important thing that I want to convey to listeners is that we absolutely will continue to engage with folks on how to, again, both build the housing that we need and protect the environment. This bill does not do anything to address sort of our commitment, my commitment, to make sure that we continue to work with the community and find win-win solutions to these urgent issues.
Got it. Thank you very much. It's time to wrap up, and I wondered if I could ask your opinion about how the World Cup went for Seattle, because Seattle was hosting these live matches all the way through July 6th when the U.S. very unfortunately lost to Belgium there. What was your take on the World Cup and how it affected not just downtown, but your district too? There was a lot going on.
There was, and there's certainly, concerns about one. I mean, I think we did an incredible job, and so I want to
pretty cool.
say,
Yeah, it was fun.
Thank you to everybody who spent countless hours planning, who did so. There was so much overtime that people put in to be able to host. We heard from so many visitors from around the world. We really put our best foot forward. At the same time, not every part of the city sort of experienced the same benefits from it. I mean, I was just talking to our coffee cart owner here at City Hall. And
good old John. I know him well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm sure. We all do. And things were dead for him on, match days, right? Huh. And so I think, we saw things where people avoided downtown if you weren't going to the heart of where the action was, Waterfront, Pioneer Square. So, the CID, I don't think benefited as much as we would have liked. Yeah. But overall, I mean, one of the other great things, besides sort of being sort of a wonderful chance to showcase to the world what an incredible city this is, and on the one hand, maybe we want to keep it more of a secret. But right. The other part is people just love being out in public together, having these, public spaces that we can enjoy each other's company. And so I think we really probably planted a seed. I do think kind of getting back to, how we address sort of some of our environmental issues, how we address some of our public safety issues. Yeah. Like we really got to design our city to encourage this sort of better use of our public space where we can build community, get to know each other, and just sort of enjoy sort of the beauty of our region together.
He shoots, he scores. Councilmember Eddie Lin, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on the program.
Thank you for covering this wonky topic.
Oh, it's very important to do. Very important to do. That's what we do here on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. Become a patron. You can access Patrons First podcasts like these. Please check out Seattle News, Views, and Brews on Patreon. Pledge $5 a month or more. Thank you very much for that assist. Great to have you listening to this podcast on Apple, Overcast, Spotify, wherever you tune in. From Seattle's District 2 to our worldwide audience, too. Thanks also for watching on Converge Media. See you next time.
Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2026.